alaikum and welcome to another session of Youth Perspectives where we discuss topics relevant to the youth of America. I'd like to welcome our guest Bint Zahra here. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alaikum salam, alhamdulillah. So our topic today is something that's becoming more and more of an issue nowadays, and it is the topic of social hijab. Social hijab can be defined in various ways, but what seems like the most simplest and easiest way to understand it is if we define it as our behaviors and our manners while we're interacting with people of the opposite gender. And I think this is something that is the same for men and women, although it does differ for people in different parts of the world. It's pretty much the same for men and women. Not only does social hijab help us set up the boundary that Islam has set for us and maintain it, but also maintain a persona or demeanor that will allow us to not only be taken seriously in this environment, but also fulfill our responsibilities as people of this community. So, Bint Zahra, what do you think is the main issue with our social hijab today?
Yeah, so I think the main issue with social hijab these days is people think that covering their head or lowering their gaze is enough to complete the requirement of social hijab. But I think that's actually not very accurate, because as I know that covering your hair as a woman and lowering your gaze as a male and even as a female is very important. It's also very important to know that there's very specific social requirements that you have to fulfill as a Muslim. Like when you're talking to a person of the opposite gender, look down, and the way you're talking really matters, you know? Like there's so many hadiths, there's so many things about like how the way you're talking matters, because the person nowadays we see that even like sometimes the hijab isn't really seen as an obstacle in looking at who you are, and so it's really important to represent yourself as make yourself a representative of Islam. So do something like talk in a way where people think, oh wow, she is actually a Muslim woman, she's very modest. It's very, very important to be modest, because it's not only about covering yourself, it's about covering having very strict boundaries of modesty and being very polite and very nice to other people. And it's like, even though Allah says that we have to cover our head, it's very important to the way we talk and the way we interact with people. That's also a very important factor of social hijab.
Yes, I really like how you said that the way we talk and the way we interact with people is the most important part, because honestly, you could have a hijab on your head and long sleeves and a loose fitting top, but it wouldn't be enough if the way you talk and the things that you say are just purely, inappropriate or, promiscuous. So yeah, what you said really made sense, because many people today complain about how women aren't taken seriously enough in the professional world, or that men can't be, normally friendly or even just be acquaintances with women without giving off the wrong impression. And all these issues occur due to the discrepancies we have in our social circles. We often forget that these rules are set in place for a reason, and not just for any reason, but to make life simpler for us and for our community, and especially living in this environment that we are in today. There's a word urf that is used to describe what a normal behavior or normal hijab would be in a certain environment, and it differs community to community. For instance, in a certain environment, wearing an abaya would be proper hijab, but in some other circumstances, wearing a loose fitting top would be the bare minimum, and would suffice as hijab. And it all differs environment to environment, community to community, and this is just one example of urf, honestly, but it applies to social hijab in the same way. The way our social hijab shouldn't necessarily have to change in different environments, but it can change depending on where we are and what kind of, for example, like if we are in a professional environment like school or work, it could be very, very different from how we would be within a social circle where we know there are non-mahram present, but we still have to interact with them. But then our way of interacting with them would be different, because we are in a social circle. And this is important not only because Islam recommends it, but also because it gives because we are in charge of the impression that we're giving on people. And as Muslims, as the Muslim youth, we're the ambassadors of our religion these days. With everything that's happening around us, we need to make sure that our behavior, our reactions, everything that we do is fitting of the way our religion is and not inappropriate towards our religion.
Yeah, I also think that social hijab also means we're representing Islam. And so another very important thing is how we talk. So when we're talking to other people, and it's not necessarily the most pleasant situation, it's very important to maintain social hijab in the way that we're talking extra politely, because we're Muslims and we need to make people aware of Islam. Like, a lot of people have a very brutal image of Islam, and it's very important for us to represent Islam, and how, like, just because we have a hijab on our head doesn't mean we're stern or we're mean or rude. We are very kind people, and that we can be polite, we can work with the opposite gender, of course staying within our limits. But of course, it's very important for us to represent that fact, because a lot of people believe that, oh, she's Muslim, she won't talk to a man or anything like that. But no, we need to prove to the people that just because we are Muslim doesn't mean we can't represent ourselves, because we're women. We can represent ourselves. Islam has given us so much liberty and so much freedom in that manner that we can go out, interact, make our own life, get educated, get jobs, and actually be a very functional part of the society. So it's very important for us to be, sometimes we need to be a little extra nice or extra polite, just to show people that we're not mean or rude. We are very nice people, and we're very welcoming, and we're not violent at all. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, I really liked how you said that there's like this struggle, because we are required not to just be nice, but but to maintain that balance between being nice and being not straightforward, but being, proper, because we are the representatives of Islam. And right now, like the previous generations before us, they had their imams with them, but we don't. And so that just makes it even more of our responsibility to make sure that we do what we can to at least give the right image of Islam, so that when Imam Mahdi alayhi salam actually does come, we have done our part in being a functional part of the society. And what goes along with social hijab is also mental hijab. Our thoughts, our reactions, all these things branch from the same issue. How we train ourselves to be around people. The thoughts that go through my head when I'm talking to someone, are they right? Are they appropriate? Are those things that I should be thinking? Even though they're still inside my head, they're affecting me, they're affecting my soul. Do I really want to have those thoughts when I'm around the imam? All these things, we should be aware of when we're in a social situation.
Yeah, and definitely, because the way you think really affects how you are. So when you're talking or when you're doing something, it's because that thing has been in your mind, and because you've thought it. Because even if you don't intentionally think that, okay, I'm going to think about this and I'm going to do it, it still normalizes in your head. Like, you still think, okay, since you've been thinking about that one particular thing for so long, you're saying, oh, okay, this is normal. To you, to your nature, it is normal now. And so it's very important to keep the right intentions in your mind. So if you're thinking something negative or inappropriate or haram, then you need to you need to ask yourself, is this something that is really okay? Because if the imam comes now, will I still be able to think this way? Is it still going to be appropriate to think this way? So I think that's very important to keep in mind. Whatever you think is what you're going to do. So it's very important to keep a clean mind, a fresh mind, and this is a really good way to do that, is by reciting the Quran, by keeping in touch with the hadith of the imam, or stories about the imam, or just general ideas of what the imams were like, because that's really going to help you keep a very clear mind. Like, if you're doing something negative, just stop and be like, is this something that Lady Zainab would do, or is this something that an imam would do? And if it's not, then think, even though you're not infallible, you can still fix yourself. You can still say, how can I do this better? How can I become a functional part of my society while understanding that I need to stay within my limits and still keep a clear intention, still think of something as positive. Like, if you're thinking about something negative, it doesn't even have to be haram. Like, anything negative, think to yourself, does it really have to be negative? Does it really have to be bad? Why can't I think of this as something positive, as something good, So I think that's really important.
Yes, that's very true. And I also think that all of this is the root of all of this is basically akhlaq, which is something that the Ahlul Bayt and Masumeen have told us about so many times, that there's countless ahadith about it. There is one specific hadith by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that is, among the Muslims, the most perfect believer in regard to his faith is he who possesses the best manners. And that tells us so much about the kind of person we need to be in the most basic terms when we're trying to be better Muslims. Because honestly, before anything, before all the responsibilities that we have, humanity is the most basic thing that we've been taught, not to steal, not to lie, not to hurt anyone. And all of this goes under the same umbrella of akhlaq, social hijab as well. Akhlaq can also be defined as the practice of virtue and morality. The kind of behavior that we have, again, not just in public, but in private, the thoughts that we have, the things that we do in private, we think no one's watching, but we know Allah is watching. And sometimes even being aware that Allah is watching us, we still do those things thinking that, oh, but no human is going to find out. And honestly, that is something that that's kind of influences, like the idea of privacy, the idea of isolation. And there's a reason that we've been warned against being in isolation for too long, because Islam has warned us against the thoughts that will come in our head while we're alone. And so that is another thing that goes under akhlaq. Even the way that we would control our anger, that is a huge part of our akhlaq, of our social hijab, because everyone has their weaknesses, everyone has their points where they just cannot bear it, they just cannot, go with it and pretend as if everything's okay. And that is all right, as long as we train ourselves to be able to bear those things and not act upon those things impulsively. You can really also tell a lot about the kind of person someone is by observing the kind of akhlaq that they have in public, which can be seen in the way that they interact with their friends, with their parents, with their grandparents, with the seniors of the community, even around little kids, the way they talk to little kids, the way they behave around little kids, being aware that that kid is learning everything from you. There's another hadith by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, that says, you should create within yourselves the akhlaq of Allah. And what he means by this is, for example, Allah is merciful. Be merciful to people around you, be merciful to kids, be merciful to the adults, to the seniors around you. Allah is forgiving. Wouldn't we want to be, generous and forgiving towards people around us? Wouldn't we want to give that same impression that we too are nice people, and not just with the hijab on our heads, not just because there's a guy who has a beard, but because of humanity, just because of humanity. And that is, akhlaq is a huge thing that basically overcomes everything that we do.
I think that what you said just now about having the traits of Allah, that is very, very true. Like, if you're doing something wrong, you should always think, is this a trait that belongs to Allah, and like the idea we have around what He is. And so I loved what you said about forgiveness, like how if Allah is forgiving, we should be forgiving. If Allah is merciful, we should be merciful. If Allah is accepting, we need to be accepting. I love that. I love how you said that.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you, have you had any experiences where where you felt like, yes, that's the kind of personality trait that I would want to adapt, because that would make me seem like a better person, or that would make me more prepared for the Imam's reappearance?
Yeah, I actually had this Quran teacher once when I was little, and she had I don't know how she had it, but she had this impossible patience where regardless of what I used to do, she would always be so patient and so calm. And I just think that is such a good personality trait, and I really want that in me. Like, sometimes I just tend to get angry and just get frustrated, but I think that is something that she taught me, even though I don't have her as my Quran teacher anymore. But that's something that she taught me that I can never forget. Like, if my little sister, sometimes she gets a little annoying, or I get frustrated at her, I just think, like, my Quran teacher, how much patience she had when me and my siblings were kids. And then I try to think, like, okay, I need to have this personality trait within me. So I think that really inspired me.
Yeah, I really like how you said that, because honestly, you said Quran teacher, and Quran teacher means she's someone who's close to the Quran. And if she's a normal human being, she's not a Masoom who is that close to the Quran, imagine how pure the Masoomin actually must be, because they are Masoom, they are infallible. So I really liked how you said that. Since we're on this topic, and also commemorating the Shahadat of Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salam, I was thinking that we could talk a little bit about Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, since his title, Al-Kadhim, itself is a huge trait that we, like we said before, need to adapt. And it means Al-Kadhim itself means that a person who can control his anger and not act upon it impulsively. And if we look at the example of this Imam, he went through so much in his life. He was born during the period of the struggle between the Abbasid and the Umayyad clans, and they were always worried that something would happen that would take away their power. And so they would constantly monitor the Imams all the way from the 6th Imam to like the 8th Imam. I mean, all the Imams had their own struggles, but this specific struggle went on between this time period. And he grew up in that environment where he saw his father being constantly monitored. He grew up looking at the change in the caliphate, and they were very personally brutal towards his family. He had, I'm not sure exactly, but I know that he had a big family. He belonged to a huge family. He had many siblings too, and the caliph of the time made sure to do everything to keep those siblings apart from each other, to keep them away from their parents. And when Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam did pass away, and the responsibility fell upon Imam Qasim alayhi salam, it got even worse, because now he first-handedly saw the struggles that he had to face. And even with all of that, they would put him under house arrest randomly in the middle of the night. They would just come and isolate him. They would take him and put him in jail, as if he wasn't even human. And we see that Imam Qasim alayhi salam never even, there's not a single instance where he lost control or he showed his anger. And to be able to have that much control over yourself, and I mean, I know that he's Masoom, but to have that much control and to not speak out against the wrong that was happening, he knew how much reward he would get when he would return to Allah. And he knew that he wouldn't ever get that amount of satisfaction by anyone else but Allah. And so that is like a huge example for us. Again, it falls under the umbrella of akhlaq. We learned so much from each Imam, their own struggles. It was crazy the amount of stuff they had to go through. I mean, they were still human. I mean, of course they were masoom, but Allah sent them down in the form of a human. So to show us that we could also go through those things. And when I think about Imam Qasim alayhi salam and all the Masumeen in general, I feel like, who are we to have bad akhlaq and bad behavior at such small issues that come up in our life? When the Imams went through so much in their lifetimes, how can we call ourselves the followers or the lovers when we can't even do the most basic of things and just be good human beings? I was going to ask you, Bint Zahra, do you have any particular story that you find particularly something that speaks out to you about Imam Qasim alayhi salam?
Yeah, I actually had this one where Imam Musa Qasim, and at his time there was this very poor, uneducated farmer who used to farm, and he was very rude to Imam. And because of all the talks going on in the society at that time, it was generally what normally happened. People were very rude to the Imam. And so one day, the Imam's friends came to him, and they said that, no, you know what, we should say something against this, because that farmer is very rude to you for no reason. And so Imam Musa Qasim, one of his very, very important traits are patience. Like she said earlier, he showed patience through everything in his life, during house arrest, during all the problems put onto his father. Well, he didn't do anything, and he said, no, we're not going to be rude to him, we're not going to be impatient, we're going to wait. And then one day, Imam Musa Qasim went to that farmer's place, and he said that you should not overwork yourself, you're very tired, and you should take a break. And so the farmer was still rude to him, and so the Imam asked him, how much would this entire land of yours cost? Like, if you were to sell all the crop off of this land, how much would it cost? And he said it would cost him 200 gold coins. And so Imam Musa Qasim said, Imam Musa Qasim took out 300 gold coins out of a pouch, and he gave it to him. And he didn't even take the crop from him. And he said, this is for you. This is so that you can relax and not overwork yourself. And so the moral of the story is, you shouldn't, just because people treat you badly, it doesn't mean you should treat them badly. If people are treating you negatively, you need to treat them better, and you need to make them feel like it's a better situation, and that whatever they're doing is wrong, but not necessarily by saying it to them or by saying, hey, you're wrong, or you're being very negative, by showing them that there's a better way, And at this instant, the Imam could have backbited. And so I have a hadith right here, but he didn't, because he had a lot of patience. And so instead of encouraging his friends or saying, hey, let's go be rude to him. He said, no, we should stop this. And so I have a hadith from Imam Ali from the Nahj al-Balagha about backbiting, which is, backbiting is the attempt of one who is incapable of doing better for himself. So I think that Imam Musa Kazim showed a lot of traits in general that every single Shia Muslim should have, every single Muslim, every single human being should have, because they're very, very general traits that really help us participate in society and make it better instead of adding negativity to it. So that's a very important story to me.
Yeah, I know. And if we really look into the stories that history gives us, there is not just one, but a countless amount of stories that we can learn from. There's so many, not just stories, but also anecdotes that the Imams have given to us through just their life, just their daily behavior. We learn so much about it. And there's, like we said, akhlaq is something that overcomes every aspect of our life. And there's a lot of things that go under akhlaq. Like we said, backbiting, anger, the way we talk to people, the way we are in public and in private, the thoughts that go through our heads when we're by ourselves, even how sometimes we are, being two-faced is something that a lot of people, have to see every day. And we see that some people, while talking to people personally, they're going to be super nice, super friendly, very praiseworthy of the other person. But as soon as they turn around, they start, saying bad things about that same person. And we see that you really don't get anything out of it. This is not really worth it. It's not really worth having to go through all the, the fake being nice and then turning around and start backbiting about that person. All of these things that we see every day, honestly, what is the point of it, And I know that it can be hard to learn stuff sometimes, but if we just look at these stories are always easier to read than just huge, philosophy books. And so just these little stories teach us so much more than we would ever expect to learn from anywhere else. So I was going to ask you, Bint, do you have a specific hadith of Imam Kadhim alayhi salam that you really, again, that speaks out to you?
Yeah, there's actually this one. It is, the most high-ranking people are those who disregard the worldly pleasures completely. And I think that's very, very important, because if you think of it this way, if you're 20 years old, your entire life passed by you within the blink of an eye. You didn't even realize, and 20 years passed by, or how many ever years passed by, even if it was 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever. And your entire life passes by so fast. And so the hadith Imam Musa Kazim gave us is so important, because if you get attached to the worldly pleasures or something in this world, a specific kind of lifestyle or luxury, it's so short and this world goes by so fast that you're not going to realize what you've missed out. Instead of getting attached to all the worldly pleasures, it's important to pray and fast and talk to Allah, because Allah is always there for us. It's not like a friend. He's always there for us. He's closer to us than our jugular vein, and it's so important because He is always listening. So instead of engaging in worldly pleasures, if we talk to Allah, if we interacted with Allah, it would be so much better. It would help us make ourselves better, our namaz better. It's so important to pray, because we only pray for 17 minutes a day. And it's so important that we actually dedicate our time to Allah. He's given us everything. Regardless of what you say, it is some way or the other, it is from Allah. Even something artificial made by a human being, it's still made by Allah, because Allah gave it to us. And so it's so important that we forget about these worldly pleasures and talk to Allah. He's given us everything, and we barely give Him any time. So it's very important to do that.
Yeah, I really like how you said that our intention should be purely for Allah, because honestly, I've experienced this in my life too. I haven't lived a very long life yet, but there's still so many things that I've seen where if you dedicate even a minute of your time to thinking about Allah and thanking Allah for all that you have, it eventually pays off. You feel so much better about yourself. There's a sweet pleasure in that in itself. You feel I haven't done much to deserve all that I have, but at least by thanking Allah, I am being aware of everything that I've been blessed to have. And also, I have another story by Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, and it's about modesty. One day, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam was passing by the tent of a nomad, of a black man. And while he was passing by, he went up to him and he said, "Salaam alaikum," in a very friendly and warm manner. Upon leaving, Imam alayhi salam was while he was passing by, he said salam, and then while he was coming back, he said goodbye to him. And again, he said it in a very sweet, very, very friendly manner, in a very warm manner too. And after saying goodbye, he also said, if there's anything I can do for you, I'm more than willing to do it. I'm always here if you need any help with anything. And so one of the followers, one of the friends of Imam alayhi salam, who saw this whole scenario play out, he said, is it suitable for you, who is the grandson of the Messenger of Allah, to sit and talk with a man of that reputation, of that of that level of society, and say things such as, if you need me, I can do anything for you? Is this really the right behavior for a man of your dignity, of your stance? And Imam alayhi salam replied in the most sweetest manner. He said, this is one of Allah's creations. Allah has created all men equal. Besides, as a Muslim, he is our brother in faith. After all, life does not remain the same forever. One who needs help today may be the same one who will provide help for us tomorrow. And because if we would have treated this man wrongly in the first place, in the end we would be embarrassed to go ask them for help when we know that they're the only ones who can provide us that help. And the moral that we learn from this is that in Islam, everyone is equal. Again, it goes back to our clock. The way we interact with people, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what behaviors they have, no matter what background they're from, the way we expect to be accepted into society with our different looks, Islam, not just Islam, but humanity expects us to do the same.
Yeah, now that you mentioned a clock, I wanted to talk about this hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam. It is that no mirror can reflect a picture of a human as best as his attitude and way of speaking. I think what Imam Musa Kazim did there, with talking politely and speaking very nicely, is very important. And have you noticed that in every akhlaq hadith, in some way or the other, there's always something about speaking nicely, being polite. And I think that's very important, especially in today's day, because there's so many misconceptions about how people are and how they're perceived to be, even though it may not be true, especially with Muslims these days. And it's so important for us to keep our attitude right. Even a little bit of negativity could give one person the wrong image of who you are, and that could stereotype Muslims as a whole, or one specific category as a whole. And so it's very important to keep the way we speak and our attitude and the way we are, the way we're dressed, the way we're perceived to be very positive and very welcoming. And so I think that's very important. And what Imam Musa Kazim, we repeatedly see he does this, is he's very patient, he's very nice, he avoids backbiting, he never says anything negative, and he just proves to us how a perfect person should be in society and how the traits of so many perfect people. And just because you're one person, it doesn't mean that, I won't make a difference because I'm just one human being out of how many ever people there are in the world. But one person fixes themselves and another gets inspired. That's two people. And just like that, people will build up and the entire society will start functioning positively, So I think that's very important. And also, we see that a lot of times people go, I am higher in society, or my caliber is higher than this person in society, and so I should be better, or I shouldn't talk to this person. But that's not true. The Imam is one of the 14 Masumeen, which is very, very 14 people out of this entire world. And he still chose to talk to someone, a regular person who probably couldn't significantly do anything very major for the Imam, but he definitely was kind, and he said, instead of saying, no, I can't give this person my time, he said, no, I'm going to go talk to this person, be kind to this person. And just because he was kind to a normal person, everybody's hearing about this story now, and it's become a very big thing. Everyone knows about it, and it's promoting kindness to the world.
Yeah, I really like how you picked up on that. Also, there's another hadith by Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam that's very for us, especially in today's time, it literally feels like he's talking to us right now. And it goes like this: indeed, cultivation and growth takes shape in a soft, even land and not in a rocky, barren land. Likewise, wisdom grows and develops in a humble heart and not in a proud, vain, and arrogant heart. So if you really think about that, doesn't it really, speak out to us, especially with today's environment, We feel like, no, I have to be straightforward. I have to be, I have to be sort of hot-headed to be able to make my point, to get my point across, to be able to be heard. And we think that that's the right way to go. But then when you really think about it, what are you accomplishing by being like that? If you're soft, if you're nice, if you're, like Imam says, if you have a humble heart, it's gonna get you so much, it's gonna take you so many more places, because look at the famous people in history. Even if we discount the Imams, just look at it in a more, like, in the entirety of the world. There's the most famous people are only famous because of their softness, of their humbleness. Like, look at Mahatma Gandhi. Like, whatever his quotes of his we look at, whatever whatever lessons we learned from him, are because he was so soft and kind-hearted, and he was an easygoing person, and that's what the Imams teach us too.
I like how you said something about a humble heart, and how, like, it cultivates, like, kindness and everything. And so I think a really important part of being humble is being forgiving. We see a lot of people hold grudges these days, like, especially in high school or college. Someone does something to you and you're like, oh, I don't like this person.
Yeah, and also just like social circles, not just high school and college.
Everyone's so like, oh, I can't forgive this person. Yeah. She wore the same outfit as me. Well, I think that's very important. Forgiveness is very important. We see so many people hold grudges, and that's not worth it. Like, our life is so short and it goes by so fast, and it's so important to forgive and love each other and live together and be very, very nice to each other. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. And it takes so much energy and time to be that invested into a grudge. It's really not worth it. Forgiving is so much easier. And honestly, I feel like it's all about feeling good about yourself. Once you forgive people about something, you really feel amazing about yourself, don't you?
Yeah, I actually have a hadith about that. The highest status amongst the forgiving is of that person who has all the power to avenge himself, yet he adopts to forgive, which is very, very true, because if you get a chance to get revenge from someone who did something to you, we always jump at it and be like, oh, this is my chance to get back at this person. But in reality, if you don't get back at this person, there's so much sawab for it, and there's so many blessings, and it's so worth it. Like, it's so worth our time to not invest ourselves in such negative energy. Like, instead of that, just be positive, be nice, be kind. And that's how I think our society is going to work better.
And again, this really goes back to social hijab again, because again, it goes back to hijab literally means to veil something, right? And so we're veiling all the God hasn't made humans perfect.
Yeah, we're
right?
veiling all the negativity.
Exactly. No human is perfect, and we know we have negativity inside us. But by veiling that, we are not only ensuring that we are making a good impression, but we're also training ourselves to keep that negativity in check, and that really does a lot for us. So just to close on this whole topic of social hijab, and the clock, and Imam Qadim alayhi salam, do you have any last remarks or closing comments over this matter?
Yeah, I just think that we should really take this opportunity to learn from the character traits of Imam Musa Kazim, and how he was such a perfect person, and how he is literally the epitome of how a person should be right now in today's day and age. Especially with all the negativity going on in our society and everything against Muslims. It's very, very important for us to really focus on the good and the kindness. It's not necessary to always get your revenge or always be like, oh, I was right. It's not necessary to be arrogant at this time. It's very important for us to be kind and to be nice and welcoming to everybody. I think that's one of the most important things we learned today.
Yeah, you're right. We're facing our own kind of oppression, especially in North America. There's a different way of it as compared to the Imam's time, but we're still facing our own thing. And honestly, all we can do is just through our positivity, through our our prayers and our du'as and all those lessons that we've learned, all these little things really do make a difference. But just to end this segment, thank you so much for watching, and just remember, at the end of the day, your clock and your social hijab is something that will help only you, and Allah has showed us the right way to do things for our own good and not for anyone else. We're not investing our time into these things for somebody else, we're doing it for ourselves. And because no matter what, being a good Muslim and having a good demeanor is a part of not just our personal identity, but also our identity as practicing Muslims. We are, like I said, we're ambassadors of our religion. With our Imam not being present with us, It's our responsibility to fulfill these things. And there's so much we can learn from Imam Qadim alayhi salam and the rest of the Muslimin, of course. Not just for Muslims, but for literally everyone. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and inshallah we will see you on our next time on Youth Perspective.